Welcome along to our second QI skills session of the collaborative. Today what we're going to be having a look at is force field analysis. So we'll do a quick bit of housekeeping beforehand. So just some signposting through to help you find the chat box to be able to put questions in, or if you want to come on verbally and ask, but do bear in mind that the session is being recorded, so we've disabled your cameras and mics, so actually you can't put your hand up and come in and ask us verbally a question if you pop them all through the chat box. What I'll do is I'll run through all of the content. There's probably half a dozen slides round about that. So I'll run through all of the content and then we'll have a Q&A session, which, as I keep saying, we'll manage through the chat box at the end. So feel free to pop your questions in as I'm going along, but I won't stop the chat and the slides to answer questions specifically. We can come back to those at the end. So a bit of background into our QI skill sessions if this is the first time you've been to one of them. So we've got a series of about 8 of these planned for 2024, covering various QI tools or techniques. They've been supported to help you in the collaborative understand how to use some of the QI tools and techniques in a primary care setting, particularly around primary care access, pharmacotherapy and CTAC services. They are not to teach you all about the QI theory and the background. It's very much the practical application of these tools in a primary care setting and drawing on our examples from our previous programmes. It won't make you a QI expert on the particular tool or technique, and if you're looking for a bit more detail, we would signpost you through to the resources that NES have got available to build some of that theoretical background. So the first thing we would like to know is, what is your knowledge of force field analysis as it stands? So Melissa's popping a poll in here. So if you could just let us know what your level of awareness is of force field analysis currently. And Melissa will let me know when she thinks we've got all our responses in.
Yeah, I think we've got most of the responses in now, so a lot of them are not aware or they know what it is, but we don't have anyone up at the 4, 5, 6 mark at the moment.
Okie doke, fabulous. That means that what we are going to cover is going to be useful then, because you don't really know anything about it. So it's just a quick introduction and giving you an example of how it might be used in a primary care setting. So thank you for that. So looking at our, sorry, I'm jumping about my slides here. Force field analysis, if we think about when it might be useful to use it, sometimes you can have loads and loads of change ideas floating about, and the team's all got different ideas about what the thing is that will make a difference and what change you could make. This is where force field analysis can help you, where you've got multiple options or where you're not really very sure how to make a change. It helps you work out a little bit more than a pros and cons list, but we'll come on to that in a second. So it will show you the sort of different factors that will contribute to your change. It helps you to engage people with a potential change, because you find out from them, what is it that you like about this change? Why would you like to do it? What are the things that concern you about it? What are the things that would hold you back from making this change? And it helps you to be able to communicate with the team, find out where they are, find out about what their concerns and what the things that might lead them to hinder getting on board with your change and might hold you up from making a change. So if you've got lots of different options on the table, or you've got lots of conflicting ideas, or lots of different people thinking their idea is the best, this is where a force field analysis can be a useful tool. So thinking about it at your planning stages before you start making changes, to figure out which ones might be the most optimal ones, or the ones that are going to get you the best support and see you through to having a successful change. How you use the force field analysis, again, we try to encourage people to be low tech with the QI tools where possible. Let's not make life difficult for ourselves. So blank sheet of paper, whiteboard, anything that you can write on basically. You identify what your change for consideration is. I'll show you an example of this, so don't worry about what it looks like just now. We'll just talk through the steps. And then consider the forces that are driving you towards making this change and the forces that are resisting. So this is your pros and cons list, is why should we do it? Why would this be beneficial for us? And then what are the things that are going to hold us back? So they can be internal factors or they can be external factors. So your internal factors could be to do with sort of levels of motivation within the team, levels of confidence within the team. External factors could be funding, could be availability of accommodation. Don't shy away from some of those big things because they have an impact, and they are things that will get in the way possibly of you being able to make a change. So there's no point pretending that they don't exist. But what a force field analysis can help you do if you use step 4 and assign scores is understand how big an impact that external force that you can't do anything about will have on you making this change, or if it's going to be so influential that it's actually going to hinder you being able to make the change at all, or whether or not it's just a really sticky thing that you have to try and work your way around. So step 4 is optional, but it can be beneficial. So you would be assigning scores to your changes from 1 being something, if you're looking at your changes, your forces driving you for the change. 1 might be something where you don't really think it's a massive driving force. It's not a big influence towards you making the change, to something like 5 or 10 where you're like, absolutely, this is a really massive influencer. This is something that's really going to help us make this change. And then the same with your forces against. And then what you do is you take that information and you analyze it. So this is where it's gone beyond a pros and cons list. So you start to look at where you can do some work, where you might need to do some activity, or you might need to do some relationship building or relationship management in order to enhance the forces that are driving your change, where you might need to do some work in building some stakeholder engagement or doing some other bits and pieces of work to help eliminate or mitigate or reduce the forces that are resisting or that are unfavourable towards your change. So what you're trying to do is to get yourself into a position where the things that are behind your change, the beneficial things, the forces that are driving you are bigger and are more. There's many more of them than there are your resisting forces, but recognizing that some of those resisting forces can be quite influential, and it will help you make a decision about whether it's a change that you actually can make, whether it's a change that it's the right time to make, because sometimes it's not to do with the change, but it's to do with context and timing. So looking at force field analysis and laying things out and using some scoring can help you do that. So as I've just described, it's helpful because it gives you a visual representation of your pros and cons. I think asking people what are the things that motivate them to make this change and what are the things that hold them back, it helps to create those conditions for change. You're getting people's views, you're getting people's opinions, you're asking them what would get them on board and what they think is going to hold them back. It supports your decision making because it gives you a bit more information around whether or not the change is something that people are going to embrace and adopt and get on board with, or whether there might be more resistance than you might have anticipated. It can help with the co-production of improvement activities because lots of those will tie in with trying to minimise or mitigate some of your hindering or resisting factors. And once you begin to reduce those or eliminate them, then you're sort of paving the way to make achieving your change easier. It can also inform your communication plans because when you get that feedback from the team or people who are going to be impacted by the change around their perceptions and their levels of support for it, it will help you to understand the sort of level of detail that people might want to need, how involved they want to be, and what sort of things they want to know about what you're working on and the changes that you're making. So finally, here is what a force field analysis can look like. As I say, try and keep it low tech, really doesn't need to be any more complicated than this. So our box in the middle, that is the issue of change for consideration. So in this example here, what we're thinking about doing with this team is looking at only DocMan documents which require clinical input are allocated to a member of the clinical team. So it's about being able to categorise what's coming through DocMan, and that only the essential stuff that needs clinical input goes across their desk, and it's reducing hopefully the workload, which is freeing the clinical team up to be able to do other things. So the forces driving the change, everybody wants to be able to reduce their workload, particularly the clinical team, knowing the demands on them. Another force for driving the change is it upskills your workforce. It gives people more variety within the jobs that they're doing, lets the tasks be a bit more varied. It's an efficient use of resource because only the people with the highest level of knowledge are seeing the things that require their input. So everybody's able to manage things within their own level of experience and confidence. And it also will have a potential driving force for the change is the development and creation of a standardised process. So that assurance that things are being dealt with in the same way, and that there's a level of quality around the management of the documents, because people are only dealing with particular types of ones rather than anything and everything that comes through the door. So in terms of forces resisting the change, sometimes these can be the exact opposite of your forces driving the change. And sometimes they can be a slight variation on that. So one thing looking at a resisting force for this change is the level of resource that's going to be required to upskill the non-clinical members of the team, and considering the volume of staff turnover within the team is, once you get somebody skilled up on this, what if they move on to another job or move somewhere else? You're having to start again. So that's something to consider, is how much time and resource is going to be put into building this skill set, and are you going to be retaining it? There is potential for issues for clinical input being missed. But again, that's something you would think about. Well, how can you minimise and mitigate the risk of that? It would be looking at where you can bring in your standardised process and having some quality assurance and some safety checks in there until you can develop that skill set and have a level of assurance and quality assurance in your system that allows you to be able to do regular audits, or be assured that the team that are dealing with the letters have got the appropriate level of skill and experience and knowledge to be able to do so. A potential force for resisting the changes also is going to be an increased workload for the non-clinical team. So nobody's sitting about with nothing to do. We know that everybody's really busy. So it's a case of, what would the non-clinical team not be doing, because they're now taking on this increased workload? So it's where do you shuffle other bits of work to, and how can you move that about, unless you're in a fortunate position where you could bring in some more resource and some more capacity into the team to be able to take this work on. So that's what your Forcefield analysis looks like. And if you were adding scores, you could just write your scores down onto these boxes and then add them up and have a look at, do you have a bigger number for your forces resisting change versus your forces driving for the change, and what could you do to kind of bring the impact of those resisting forces down? And that is a rapid whistle-stop tour through Forcefield analysis. So this is time to pick up on any questions from yourself. So if you want to pop those into the chat box, if you've got anything that you want to ask or any comments you'd like to make. Thanks, Tanya. I'm assuming that that's hitting the mark for you. Maybe you're thinking that you'd be able to use Forcefield analysis somewhere. So great. So the point of the QI skills sessions is to introduce you to the tools. If there are things that you want to go off and have a bit of a play with and have a go at working through them, then absolutely, by all means, go through them. You can get in touch with the team at any time, or come to a support and learning session to share how you found using the tool, what you think about it, and if you need any additional help. Right, so explaining the scoring again. Right, let me go back. So if we were looking at this example here and we decided that we wanted to add scoring, and we're working on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being doesn't have very much impact, to 5 being no, this is going to have a massive impact. So the forces for driving the change, if we're looking at reducing the workload of the clinical team, that's a big ticket item. So chances are we would probably say that's a really big force driving us for this change, because reducing that workload is something important that we want to do. So we would score that a 5. If we look at upskilling the workforce, it might be that the group that we're working with are like that. We're quite happy with the range of work that we do. We're happy with the skill set. We're not necessarily looking to expand our skill set and develop ourselves and take on any new duties. So, but some of them might be like that. No, I'd love to do something different. I'd love to have a new task to take on and develop my skills and my learning. So maybe we would score that one across the team. It would average out as it would come up as a 3. So it's kind of middle of the road of quite important, but not the most important. Efficient use of resource. Again, the team might think, you know, we're not using our team well here. You know, the clinical team are looking at things that they don't need to be looking at. You know, they're wasting time on some straightforward letters that don't require any clinical input. So we're not efficiently using our resource. So looking at using that resource efficiently again is quite important. So maybe that would score a 4 or a 5. So you could put it somewhere around there. Standardised process, if you had a chat within the team and it transpired that GPA does it one way, GP2 does it another way, and everybody's dealing with a letter in a different way, and you can't be assured that the same outcome and the same decisions are always going to be made. Having a standardised process could again be one of those things that you feel is quite important, because it's going to assure you of the quality of managing that letter. So that again would maybe put that at 4. And you would add all of those up to give yourself a total for the forces driving the change. You would then do the same for the forces resisting the change, and then see what the balance of the numbers is. So where's your bigger score? Have you got more things that you're saying are 4s and 5s for your forces resisting the change? So if you've got more points for forces resisting your change, you need to have a look at what you can do to bring those down, to minimise the resistance to those changes. Because if you don't do anything about it and you try to push that change through, the chances of you getting it through are slimmer, or it's going to take longer, or it's just going to be harder. So if you do a bit of work in the background. So the benefit of scoring, assuming that the change we want to make is important. Yeah. So you don't have to do the scoring, but again, the scoring can be important and can help you understand if there's any sort of pre-work that you need to do before you bring this change in. So if all of the forces resisting change here were all a 5, then you're going to get a lot of pushback on this change. So do you need to have a conversation with the non-clinical team to have a discussion about it possibly is going to be a bit of an increase of the workload of the team for the short term, but maybe we need to look at how we balance that out. Maybe there's some tasks that you're doing that somebody else could do. Maybe there's some things that we're doing that we don't need to do. Maybe there's some things that we're doing that we're doing twice when actually we could only be doing them once. So it helps you understand what are the things that are going to get in the way, and what are going to be the reasons that people aren't going to get on board with your change. And it will hopefully just ease the change in and create those the conditions and the will for change, and set you up in the best way for the change that you want to make being important. Because every change that you want to make is important. You know, nobody's doing change for the sake of it. But I think understanding whether you've got more enthusiasm for the change versus resistance and reluctance to make it will help you understand, maybe with a bit of timing for the change, and whether there's some chats that you need to have and some reassurance that staff need to have about the change before you begin to test it, that might reduce some of that resistance that they might put up for it. Right, you're saying it makes sense now. Hopefully that's giving you what you need. But again, scoring is something, it's optional. You don't have to do it. If you think you might want to do it and you think it's going to be beneficial, take the time to do it, but it's not essential. Do you know, like this list might benefit from scoring because there's a pretty even balance between the forces driving and the forces resisting. If you've got loads and loads of things on the side of your forces driving the change and 1 or 2 on your resisting, you can see visually what the balance is. So yeah, maybe when you've got something that it feels a bit even on the forces for and the forces against, that might be where scoring can be beneficial and helpful for you to aid your decision making. But sometimes it's just a lot of eyeballing and guesswork. And with QI, it's about testing it and having a go. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, then you stop. You you regroup and you either backtrack and tweak or change something, or you put it down and you start something else. So there is no absolute cast iron way of using these tools. You just try and use them in the way that best fits your context and is going to be helpful for you. So any other questions, anything you would like me to go over or to talk through again? Nope, not seeing anything else come through the chat box. So as I said, if any questions pop up after the session or later on, or you want to link in with the team to have a chat about using any tools, please feel free to get in touch with us through the generic email address. If you're looking for more information and more details about force field analysis, then let us know and we can signpost you through. But other than that, that brings us to the end of our session, bar just doing a quick poll now for what is your level of knowledge of force field analysis, having had a quick 20-minute shot through with me. Is that all our responses in now, do you think, Melissa?
Yep, so we've got a lot of 3s, 4s and 5s now, so no one's in the 1 or 2s anymore. So the majority are sitting at know how, when and where to use it. So that's good.
Magic. So we'll give ourselves a big pat on the back in our team that we've explained to you what force field analysis is, and you've got a sense of where and when you might use it. So thank you very much for your time. We will be posting the slides and the recording on our Teams channel soon, so keep an eye out for that. And as I say, if there's anything you want to know in the meantime, please don't hesitate to get in touch with the team and we'll see what we can do to help you out. So thank you very much for coming along this afternoon.